everyone's chiming in, we could do some intros from the Linear team. I'm Erin. I work with customers at Linear, and I'm based in Oakland, California right now.
I'm Adrian. I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal. I'm a product designer at Linear, and it's a pleasure to present you what we've been working on in the past months with the team.
Hello, I'm Paul. I'm doing front-end at Linear, and I've been working on timeline implementation for the last 2 months nearly.
Maybe I should go. Andreas, I work from Sweden. I've been at Linear for a year or so, doing all sorts of stuff, front-end and back-end.
Hey, I'm Thomas. I'm calling in from Helsinki today. Engineering didn't do much for the roadmap, but I was still chiming into the session.
So we are very pleased today to introduce you to a new way of visualizing project in Linear. So this feature will be available from the view option. So from now, if you're using roadmap, this is what you already see. And now use timeline, which is a new way for you to plan your project over time. The idea of this feature is like it's been requested, and this is always like it's giving Linear a new way and a new vision on how the projects are going over time. And like we want to help you plan better your next product decision with this feature. So basically, you will refine all the information you already have in roadmap. So you have the milestone, you have the project list, you have the project status. The new big thing is that now you have those bars that you can basically drag around and help you plan your project. So to get you started, what we can do is that we can just create a bar from scratch. So for now, I have this coffee machine replacement project that Thomas is working on. And from now, we only have end dates to project. But so with this timeline now, you have a start date. So when you just turn the project into a bar, the statute will change. And what you can do at this stage is like decide that maybe I want to start this project in April and I want it to end up in the end of June. So as you can see, this is like basically a very, like you have all the feature that you would expect from a timeline this way. You can drag up, drag down the project. You can also like move it this way over time, like dragging it. The interesting thing about this project visualization is that we also give you a sense of like, are you going to be able to reach the project timeline that you actually set up? So you already have now in Linear those graphs where we can tell you like, oh yeah, are you on time? Is the project staging? Is the project going to be late? So you usually find those graphs on the roadmap by pressing spacebar, for example, to have the project peak. So it's still available on roadmap. For the one that maybe don't know this feature, actually it's already available in the product. So when you press spacebar, also work on issues, you can like kind of preview what's going on. So we wanted to use those prediction in the timeline and kind of help you know what's going on quickly without going to the project or asking any updates from the team. So as you can see, for example, like when you have those red dots and bar at the back, that means that we think this project is not going to be able to be achieved in the time you decide. So you can either like decide to just drag up the project and say like, okay, now maybe I need to add some times. Maybe there is some more thing to investigate inside the project. Maybe the scope is not good. Maybe your team is late. There are many information and many decisions you can take. We're not telling you what to do, but we're actually telling you that something wrong is going on. When you see a bar like this, that means that the project actually doesn't have an end date. So maybe some of you don't really like to work with end dates. It's totally fine for timeline to work too. But we already have those predictions. So we decided to show you those predictions in the timeline. So you can guys understand like, okay, that's might be the end of the project. So those predictions are based on like what are the rest of the issues that are not achieved yet, and also the team velocity. So as you can see inside those bars, you have like two colors. So this is actually the progress bar of completion of your issues at the project. So even like, for example, in roadmap timeline, this is like the project that we've been working on with the last 2 months with Andreas and Paul. As you can see, we might get late because for sure we have new things we want to achieve for timeline, but we are pretty much on time. So So those kind of project appearance are, for example, for pause project. So when you decide to pause a project, we want to make sure it's different than the rest. So you can know that something is like maybe paused, like you don't really have to take care of it. And what we do is that we show you those little status icons that you can hover. So it's make it easy for you to understand what's going on the project. If something is looking weird, if not everything is fine, you don't have anything. I don't know what else to add to this. You can decide to basically visualize this timeline per quarter, per month, per week. We usually use year at linear at the moment. This is something we are maybe thinking put it back in the view option, because we realize in the end by using it that you're not really switching all the time those things. So actually timeline is still like, it's the first version of it that we're releasing today in a feature preview, but we will still be improving it in the coming weeks and months. So if you have any feedback, if you feel like we are missing something, don't hesitate to reach to us, because we'll be happy to improve it. And for sure, there is a lot of going on at once for us to manage. So we are not sure we're covering all the aspect of it, but so far it's been working pretty much very good for the team. So we're happy to hear your comments and information about it. I don't know, Paul, if you want to add anything to this, or Andreas.
We just shipped it a couple of minutes ago as a preview feature. So if you want to try it, you can search in your command menu for timeline and enable it for your organization.
Yeah, so I think you have to open Command K and then search for preview, right?
You might need to reload the app first.
And do you want to go into a little bit about how we built it, or how we decided on like this design? Were there other designs that we were debating, or were there any kind of challenges in the project?
Yeah. So for sure, like this feature has been requested for a long time. This is always like, this is the way we wanted to go to, like at some point to trying to give more and more like degree of visualization what's happening in linear. So for sure, timeline will be like the next one to go to. Like I think it improve a lot the way you will ship product, and actually give you a better understanding on what's going on and plan in the future. But in the same time, the big challenge for us was that we already have those predictions, and we don't approach linear as something just like an issue tracker where you enter data and after nothing happened. We actually know what's going on. We are able to understand better and to have like a live visualization on what's going on in your project. So the big challenge was how we can merge those data that we have about your project and in the same time let you interact with it. So we kind of went over crazy on design, like trying to integrate those graphs into the timeline. That was like a big challenge for us, because for sure, like a lot of products have timelines and they let you do a lot of things, but visualizing like the data we have inside the rows was very challenging for us. And in the same time, we don't want it to have a timeline that is too strict. So you can really move around and interact with like what you expect to do, for example, with project, and like we want you to be free, but in the same time, what you do in timeline has an impact on the entire team. So actually, if you move a project deadline, it will impact the rest of your issue. It will impact the way your team perceives the project. So we wanted you also in the same time to alert you when something is wrong. And so that was the big challenge, was what level of interaction you can have with the timeline, and at the same time, like how you have to understand that this is the overview of your product. And so we want to make sure that what you do inside is accurate, because it's live and everybody can edit at the same time. So that was the biggest challenge. I think on the technical side also, like we are loading a lot of data in front. You are able to go back in time. We wanted to create an experience that is pretty smooth and don't feel slow, because this is the kind of visualization that you want to interact quick. And so that was also a big challenge on our side, technical side, to make sure that this data is actually always loading fast and that you don't feel like this timeline is slow. We keep planning as like something like a meeting with your team that you will have where you decide, oh, we're going to do this project, or maybe this, we're going to do that later. So you want to move around stuff quickly and you don't want to have big loading times. So this place is a place for discussion, to plan, but it's also a place to track your work live. So that was the big challenge in terms of design and technical side, was like how we can make that feel like seamless, but in the same time with very complex concepts inside.
Adrian, I realized we forgot to show something. We should create a new project.
We should create, oh, actually, that's true. So for those of you that already knew the roadmap, we kind of changed the way you can create projects in Linear. Now you have these models. For sure, it kind of reminds you the fast issue. I think this is something we're trying to do at Linear, is like to move to like give you the best experience to create projects. So for now, it's still like a very small model, but for sure we have planned to make that more complex and more powerful in the future. So this is the first step to making those projects look like actually bigger than they are by making this model. So yeah, you have a new model now to create project. You will find the icon you like. We add some icon recently to the project. We're keeping adding those. If you have actually any icon ID that you want to see, you can reach to us in Slack. We always try to add the one that people want. And so yeah, like test project, for example, and you will be added to the timeline directly there. And then if you want to plan, again, you can drag along this and decide that, oh yeah, let's go.
One thing you know is you can always right click to bring up the contextual menu. I know everyone loves keyboard shortcuts, but whenever you need to do something, you can always right click. It's also helpful if you forget, for instance, the keyboard shortcut.
Yeah, a question that popped up in the chat. Right now, we don't allow changing start date if the project has already started. We're thinking about possibly changing that, but we haven't made a final decision yet. But we'll probably make that possible.
I think one reason for that is that if you start a project and then stop it, if you change the start date, I believe it resets the graph right now. So we want to make sure that you have your graph. Very cool. Are we ready for questions or anything else we want to add or share about it?
I was also curious on the technical challenges. Like, I mean, it's like this kind of timelines can be like hard to build on the front end. So, but it's like the performance is good. So can you talk about that?
Okay, so I can talk about that. So we had two main issues. Is like one, you have like a big list of projects that can reach like 100, maybe 1,000 for big company, and then you have like this infinite time, right and left. So you have like scrolling in all direction, and when it comes to that, everything is harder on a browser. So we're using two techniques to solve that. So for the vertical scrolling, we use a virtualized list. So it means we only render the few rows that actually are in the viewport, and everything outside we just like drop it and forget about it until you scroll to it, and then suddenly we put them back in. So this lets us handle like any number of projects far more performant. For the horizontal scrolling, this was like the biggest challenge. So if we were to rely like on the normal scrolling, like browser scrolling native behavior, either we draw the full bar and then the scroll bar at the bottom will be like super small if you have long project or super big if you have like small project. When you scroll down and new bars come in, then your scroll bar could like be resized depending on the size of the project. Also, if you want to like move far in the future, far in the past, when you reach the like we don't load all the time, obviously. So when we would reach like a boundary, we would have to add more time, which we're doing currently, and then the scroll bar would jump. But because you're still dragging for the browser would like try to take your scroll bar back to the end, and you would have like this glitchy situation you can find on a lot of other timeline, basically, where like it's conflicting between loading more and more and the browser trying to catch up. So we dropped the native like scroll bar, and what we're doing is like we're drawing this viewport, and we draw all the bar and just let them overflow on each side. And when we scroll left and right with our like customized horizontal scroll bar, we just like translate the full timeline left and right, and so everything like come into view, and like while other stuff go out. And because it's a customized, like our own customized scroll bar, we can do stuff that doesn't respect native convention. So when you reach the end of the scroll bar left and right, we just like start scrolling automatically for you without jumping. We just like smoothly keep going. And as soon as we detect you are close to a boundary, like left or right in the past or future, we just like add more to like the chronology at the top. But we don't have to add any more for the bars themselves because, as I said, we already draw them fully and we just translate the content. So by doing like this overfoot translation horizontally and this virtual list like list vertically, we can like combine nice performance by not drawing too much and not having to redraw while you scroll horizontally too many things. And this allows us to be like quite performant, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't like quite show on Zoom, but if you try it, then I think the scrolling feels really nice, and you can go like diagonal and you can go any direction like quickly. I guess there was also a question about the design, and I don't know if Adrian, do you like? I mean, you've been working on this for a long time, so I mean, if you want to talk about the process.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we shipped roadmap, I think in January this year. So like that was the first step where we tried to see like what's going on around project and timeline. Is something people asked a lot. We got requests for Gantt chart, we got requests for many way of visualizing timeline, but I think in the end that linear is a very opinionated product, and we try to understood what it was meaning for us to create a timeline. Even if we think that was a good idea, we didn't know exactly where to go. So as I was telling earlier, I think we had this idea of like how we can show predictions. So I think this is where we would like to approach the product, is that we know what's going on everywhere and inside the app, but in the same time, we want to report quickly to you so you can take the best decision as possible. So the idea was that how we can create something interactive, but in the same time that kind of lets you know what's going on and where you should plan stuff. That was one of the biggest challenge in terms of designs. Also something we like to do, we do those quarter review where we plan the work with the team and we decide, okay, I'm going to work on this and this. And this is a very like open chat discussion with everybody in the team, because we kind of set the strategy for the quarter. So we wanted to create a timeline, but that doesn't feel slow, where you have to move blocks by like many actions. We want to have something that you can plan quickly. So the biggest challenge was how we can show as much information in the rows, so you don't, because maybe you might have a big list of projects, like as you can see, even for quarter, like a small team like us have a ton of projects. Even if it's a demo, we are not actually working on those things, but this is kind of the amount of project we have per quarter. So we wanted to have something that actually give you good visualization of how this time period is going to look like, and make sure that everybody can interact with it live. So that was the biggest challenge. I think we redesigned those bar many times. Should we show the icon? Should we only show the title? There was like a lot of discussion around this. Yeah.
And I guess, yeah, like often like how we work on the features is that like we on the design side, we probably explore a lot of different directions, and then I think like we know that like we need to like build it to actually feel it out. And then I think like there's been a lot of changes once the team started building it over the weeks, and we've been trying different things to figure out like what feels right.
Yeah, that was a very iterative process because I think it's a design that is not very static. You have a lot of interaction that you have to think about, and so we had some ideas of the layout and how we want to visualize project with quite different things. But when Paul and Andrea started to work on it, we decided that okay, now it's the time to really try those design out. And there have been a lot of back and forth as we were trying it and using it more. So it was very interesting on the design side to see that this is not static. It has to move. It has to be interactive. So it's very hard to prototype. There are a lot of data, and when you change something, you have to do a lot of change in your design. So at some point, the team went more on the technical side of it, try to see what are the challenges. Then after it was a lot of back and forth with Andreas and Paul. So yeah, that was a very good teamwork, and we worked really hard on this, and so we are very proud to present it today. So it's not just design and tech; it's like the good interaction between both that kind of create this feature.
Great. Are there any other questions? I think start putting in more questions into the chat. Love to hear your thoughts. If you want to ask a question in person over instead of in chat, just raise your hand, and we'll go that way.
Maybe while we wait, do you want to take the open sourcing of our real-time data synchronization engine, Thomas?
Sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand, but can I ask a quick question?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I missed the first half of the meeting, but I'm wondering, how does one change start dates and end dates of projects so that they adjust over the calendar? Apologies if this was already covered.
So it really depends of the status of your project. If your project is turned into in progress, you cannot edit the start date because it's start recording what's going on inside the project. So if you really need to change that, the way around now that you have is actually maybe to put your project back in plan. And so when it's in plan, that's when you're in plan mode. So this way you can drag the project around, move it, move only the start date if you want, or the end date, the way you go. But as soon as you turn your project into in progress, the start date for sure will be the day to day because you just decided to turn in progress for now. So yeah, that's why maybe you cannot edit the start and end date because your project maybe is already planned. But if you is it already in progress, sorry, but if you put it back in plan, you should be able to edit it.
Okay, and I guess target date is what you use to, I don't know how you call it here, the little calendar associated to projects. That's how long it would be.
Exactly.
You mean?
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, jumping in on the open sourcing, the real-time sync engine question that we had in the chat. We are not planning to do it now. Like I would love to, but it's a huge effort because it is somewhat tied to the linear application itself, and sort of removing it from everything and making it super generic so that anybody could use it would be quite an undertaking. Maybe sometime in the future.
Tommy's asking about filters. Can you share more about the filters planned for the roadmap, specifically whether we can filter for leader or team?
Yeah, I can take that.
So, yeah, go ahead.
So it's not possible right now. We're planning to add filters to these views sometime in the future. But for now, you can press Command F and search in the view for the title, but no other filters at the moment.
Feel free to also ask questions not specifically related to timeline. Like if you have questions about projects, you have a lot of the team here, you can ask anything. Yeah, does someone want to talk about our approach to projects?
Yeah, should I do that? I'll do that. Yeah, so like in general, we think of projects as limited in scope and time, and usually we try to keep them fairly short, like one feature basically. And we find that to be a fairly good way of scoping out work and being focused on the specific things we need to do. I'm sure Thomas has more input.
Sorry, I
Or
was
Kari.
totally zoned out. I was chatting. What was the question about?
Can you share more about how we approach projects? There was a note that they look relatively small in scope, kind of like what our thought process is.
They look small because we're so fast. No, like what we try to do is like we don't try to go further than 3 months out when we plan our projects. The main reason for that is that priorities might change. We might we might find something that needs our attention, or we might find some high priority items that would make sense for most people. So we don't want to sort of plan out a full year of projects, for example. And the types of projects that we undertake are those that sort of fit into a quarter. So I don't think that we've ever undertaken a project that has taken more than 3 months. If that was the case, then we would sort of split it up into smaller pieces. Like we want to make sure that we can ship these things to our users as quickly as possible and as early as possible, so that people get some benefit out of our work. We wouldn't want to go into a sort of huge project for half a year, then ship it and find out that it's not really beneficial for users. And that's why we do these preview features as well. Like we want to get this, like even though the feature is not fully completed and it will have some rough edges and maybe even some problems and bugs, we want to ship it early so that we can start getting feedback from you, our users, as early as possible. Because only with sort of a good feedback loop can we make sure that we build things that make sense for you.
And Karthik's asking how we handle projects for bug fixes and optimizations. Do you want to take that, Kari or Thomas?
Yeah. So I think the verdict is still out there. Like I would want to use projects for bug fixes and performance related things, but those are usually just ongoing issues. Like you will never be completed with bug fixes, and you will never be completed with performance. So it would essentially be a project that never completes. And as such, maybe labels might make more sense to capture all the problems that you have. We currently do have projects for performance related things, but it somehow feels that we're misusing the project grouping for that.
And there's a question about how many issues we have per project. And that really varies. So one thing that's key with the team, the way we work is there's a team lead. The team will collaborate on the project brief, but then once that's completed, once that's kind of given the go ahead, everyone adds their own issues. And maybe does someone want to talk about that process of what it's like to create your own issues in the project and what it's like in those early days of building out the project?
I can, yeah.
Go ahead.
So yeah, like we do the quarterly planning. So usually we have like some kind of idea for like, these are the things we want to tackle this quarter. Like, and we make a list of like, these are probably the projects or features we want to build to tackle these things. And then when we get into we actually assign someone to like, okay, this is the team and the lead for the project, and that team is usually maybe like 3 people, because our company is also small. So like we cannot put like 10 people on a project, but there's usually like maybe 3 people, like couple engineers and 1 designer, if there is any kind of user-facing stuff. And then we have like a general like kind of idea what the project should be about, but then the team kind of produces this project brief that talks about like more about the project. That it's not very long. It's like we try to like make it short, but it should talk about like why are we doing this, and what are the problems we're fixing, what is the scope, or like what kind of solution we think would work. And then we do some like research, like user research, like going through the feedback or asking people about it as well. And then once that is done, then the project gets created in Linear, and then the team kind of like start scoping the tasks. But we kind of like want to talk about or like write something about the project first before we start like working on it, in order to like, and we share these documents within the team or within the company, and that way like people can read them and comment on them, and kind of like everyone is aligned from the beginning, and not like they're like, sometimes with projects what happens is that the project gets started, people build on it, and then some people realize later that, oh, actually like I was expecting something else, and then like now everything is kind of like you need to debate or argue like which way should we go. So that's why we want to like first do the project brief to align everyone, and then go into, again, the team will go into the project and start creating the issues as needed. Often they start with few issues because they just need to figure out things. And then usually as we go, like, I don't know if you want to peek on the roadmap timeline, like you can see on the project, Adrian. So you can see that the bar, if you peek on the project, so you see that the bar is kind of like going up as we make progress, we figure out we need to do more things. And so it's kind of like in this project, it's how much we worked on it, also correlated of how much work we created in it. So it was like increased over time. Yeah, and then eventually we just decide, okay, this is it. Like we have to like complete this now, and like everything is there, and like yes, later we might want to like do another pass on it, that we want to add this feature or like change this thing. So, but we want to like shut down the project, like complete the project eventually, so it just doesn't go on forever. So yeah.
We had a question about labels. How do we use labels? And I know some people have very strong thoughts on labels on this team. So who wants to take that?
I can take it. Like generally, like we try to like avoid making too many labels. I think that's like challenge with any kind of labels, usually, that you end up with a lot of labels. So I think like the main labels we use is just the bug label, and there might be other labels like design, or like a design label is just like, this is a design task, so it's easier to track. We also use labels for specific parts of the software. So sometimes there's, for example, like there's search. Like search is one of the features. It's kind of like its own feature. So sometimes we capture bugs or fixes or ideas with that label. There's also like the editor, like the way you write the issues and like use the markdown and everything. That's also fairly complex piece. So there might be like several issues that are attached to that. But overall, like we don't label everything. we just don't feel like it needs that. But like relabel when there's like some kind of reason for it, that we want to categorize them or track things more.
Yeah, we had a question on what one story point or estimate point means to us, and it is really just relative. We purposefully don't set any times or dates on estimate points. I've seen many companies do say like one point is 1 hour of work, and 3 points is a day, and 5 points is whatever. To us, story points or estimate points are just relative measurements of how complex a task is. And they're supposed to remain relative. So everybody has their own scale. They use it as they please. And the project velocity will in the end, account for how fast you make progress on a project. So my suggestion would be to just do what feels right. Like the biggest amount shouldn't be 2 weeks worth of work. You maybe should sort of try to constrain your issues to be smaller than maybe a week worth of work, and then within that time frame, use your estimates as a sort of measurement of complexity.
Great. Ono is asking about design. How do we estimate the design work for a project? So Adrian, Kari, do you want to share a little bit about your process?
I think how we usually approach design is also a way for us to kind of understand what is the problem. So it's very hard for us to scale any design time range of of any estimate on a project before actually starting to designing it. So usually what we do is and that's for every project, even the one that doesn't require design, we try to write some specs that we share publicly with the team so everybody can have some feedback on it and impression. Then I think most of the time the first design is just how we can get a general idea of what's need to be done. So it's kind of open discussion also with the engineering team to see okay, are we going to be able to do it? What we need to implement maybe in backend first to make sure we can really be able to ship that in front end then. So I think we kind of approach design to see how we can be strategic about this feature, how far we want to go, what be the end result of it. And then when we kind of scope it down to what we really want to achieve with the time we have and the resources we have, we usually try to get it done in multiple issues and multiple tasks. Then this is where the real estimate kind of exists. But at the same time, sometimes the engineering is already starting on the project. So it's kind of the exploration phase could be a big estimate. Maybe it could take around 1 week or 2 weeks, a lot of discussion with the design team or engineering side. And then usually after we try to scope it down to multiple tasks that actually have shorter estimates.
Yeah, and I often start with kind of exploration tasks that I don't I think that I would estimate will take a couple days or something, or depends on the project. If it's small thing, then it's shorter. But if it's a large project like this, then I would probably spend a couple of days just to even just exploring what this could be and what kind of directions could there be, and then by doing that I get a better idea of how much work there might be, and then after that I can kind of estimate it more to create more specific tasks or issues around okay, we need this kind of view or this kind of interaction or this kind of thing. But I think it's with design, it's hard to predict from the very beginning how much work there is.
Jimmy, Joel, we definitely want to do more content on how linear works. If you have more questions, this is a good time to ask too. We still have about 15 minutes left, so we can go into more about our processes, any specific questions on how we work or areas of the app. And feel free to chime in, just unmute and ask your question too.
I'll jump in really quick. I'd love to hear more about how you do cycles at Linear, like internally, and if you do like a betting or planning process at the beginning of a cycle, or what that looks like.
Yeah. So yeah, we tried like different ways. So I think like in the very beginning we did like 1 week cycles, and I think like how we did it was like to basically we would just as a team to kind of come together and just like chat about like what is on it, like what should we be doing this week, and then like see like we also like assign tasks to everyone, so that way we can see how much like what are people actually going to work on, or like who is going to work on what and how much there is to do, and is that like reasonable. At some point we went to like 2 weeks cycles again, but then we felt like that didn't work well, so we're now like back at 1 week cycles again. In our case, we do have like 2 kind of different time zones and teams going on. So there's the European side, which is like kind of 8-10 hours ahead of the US side. So that have made it more challenging for us to like do the cycle planning together. So now we do it more like per like US team does its own cycle planning. We are part of the same cycle, but we just kind of talk with the US team, what are we going to do? And then the Europe team talks themselves like what they're going to do. And then like just terms of like, I think generally like we try to prioritize the projects in the cycle. So generally like people are primarily focusing on some kind of project, but then we also add other fixes that needs to happen. Like there might be bug fixes or just other fixes or improvements or something. In addition to that, we also have this like engineering goalie rotation. So basically every week, one of the engineers is like kind of like a support engineer that they help the support like and fix bugs that come through customers or users. So then they can also help diagnose issues, but also fix them. So we do that like kind of, I guess, part of the cycle, but it's also like kind of helping the customer support. Plus, like we see that the value is also that like more people in the team are more exposed to the kind of user problems and bugs, and we can learn, everyone can learn more through that. But yeah, I think like on the cycles, we don't like focus too much on like, okay, how many points we are making. It's more just that like, let's just look at like, are we making progress or are we not making progress? Because then that there might be some, if we're not making progress during a week, then it might mean that there's some kind of issue or like some kind of problem that we, I don't know, maybe we are not using the product, or maybe, I don't know, people, there's some kind of blocker or something that people are not able to do things.
Cool, thanks.
We had a question on what's coming up next. So anything we want to maybe share about what we're working on now?
So we generally, we generally don't want to make any promises or tell what we're working on, because we do regularly switch from project to project and just drop something on the floor if we find something more important that needs to be done. Yeah, keep an eye out on the change log on what we're working on. Obviously, with what relates to the timeline, like, would really want your feedback on what you think of it and what you think the if you still have any problems with it, or any suggestions on how you would want to use it differently. That's why we're opening up these into previews, so that we can learn from you, what to do with the feature going forward.
And a great place to share that feedback is Slack. So if you're not part of the Slack yet, go to linear.app/join-Slack, or just find it in your avatar menu. I don't know if Adrian, you want to show how to get to the avatar, get to Slack from there, from the avatar menu. But you can also click the button down there, help and feedback, to send a message to us, and we'll get back to you and file the feature request.
There's also like a comment on the design process that some like Catherine, like, I don't know, butchered the name, but like we love the Figma demo. So we might, like, this is kind of like something similar we wanted to do, and I think we can do more of those things as we go. We are planning to make a new release eventually, so I think that time we could also try to prepare some like design demos on the features we built for that, and then we can show those there.
Great. Any last questions? Great. Okay. Well, I'll hang out for a bit. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Andreas, Adrian, and Paul, for shipping such an incredible feature and doing the demo.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.